Your proxy exits in Singapore. Clean residential address, right country, the IP check glows green. But the browser sitting on top of it is quietly telling every page a different story. Its clock is set to New York. Its language header asks for German first. Its keyboard layout is one a Berlin user would keep. The network says one place, the machine says two others, and a real person almost never contradicts themselves that completely. This is the layer people forget, the quiet consistency signals, time zones and language and locale, and how a platform reads the disagreement between them long before it reads anything you actually did. I run proxy and cloud phone farms, real handsets and real residential and mobile exits, and I manage a lot of separate accounts on top of them. The ones that get flagged early almost never get flagged for something dramatic. They get flagged because some small setting under the hood never matched the address they were browsing from. I have watched a profile with a clean fingerprint and a clean proxy still pick up friction, and every time the cause was one of these boring locale values pointing at the wrong country. So I treat them as first class, not an afterthought. What these signals actually are: Timezone, language, and locale are a small family of settings that each answer the same question from a different angle. Where is this person? The time zone is the offset your clock keeps from UTC. The language is the ordered list your browser says it prefers. The locale is the region setting that decides how dates, numbers, and currency get formatted. Each is set once, quietly from your operating system, and then rides along under every page you load. Alone they look harmless. Together they describe a place, the time zone your browser reports. The simplest of them needs no network trick at all. Your browser hands any page the time zone your computer is set to, straight from the OS, no permission asked. If your machine keeps your real local time while your proxy exits on another continent, the page now holds two locations that do not agree, the one the IP claims and the one your clock keeps. A real user's clock matches where they are. An account whose clock sits an ocean from its address every session hands a detection system the cleanest contradiction it could ask for: JavaScript time and the clock. It goes deeper than a single offset. The same time engine exposes the offset, the daylight saving behavior, and increasingly the named zone itself. A page can ask your offset now, then ask again for a date in winter, and infer your whole zone from how the two differ. None of this touches the network path the proxy controls. It all runs locally, in the page, reading values your own machine volunteered. A proxy that fixes your address does nothing here unless the browser's clock was moved to match it. The accept language header: before any script runs, your browser has already spoken. Every request it sends carries a header listing the languages you accept in priority order, and it goes out on the very first page load. If it leads with German while your IP sits in Singapore, the mismatch is recorded before the page has drawn a pixel. This one matters because it is so early and so passive. You do not run anything or grant anything. The browser announces its language preference to every server it touches, and if that preference was left set to your real home, it labels the account on arrival. The system locale and region. Underneath the language list sits the locale, a broader region setting that shapes how everything is formatted. Whether a date reads day, then month, or month, then day. Whether a number uses a comma or a full stop. Which currency feels native, which day the week starts on. Pages read these choices, and they are a subtler tell than the raw language string. Someone whose IP says one country, while their dates, numbers, and currency all format for another, is showing a seam. It is the kind of detail nobody sets deliberately, which is why it is trusted when it is read. The keyboard layout tell. There is a quieter cousin still, the keyboard. The browser can often see which input layouts your system has installed. A machine set up for a Berlin user tends to have a German layout sitting there. If the account claims to be somewhere else, that layout is one more small vote for the real location. On its own, it proves nothing. Plenty of people keep foreign layouts around. But stacked with a clock and a language header that point the same wrong way, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a person who is not who the address says. The Singapore IP with a New York clock. Put the classic case together. The proxy exits in Singapore, so the address check is happy, but the time zones is New York, whole hours away. The language header leads with German, and the locale formats dates the European way. 3 settings, 3 different stories, none agreeing with the address or with each other. This profile has a passport from one country, a watch from another, and a keyboard from a third. No clean network hides the fact that the person it describes does not exist. Why the mismatch matters more than any single value. None of these values is suspicious by itself. Millions of people browse in a second language. Plenty of travelers carry a home clock into a foreign country for a week. The signal is never one value in isolation, it is the disagreement between the layers. Detection systems are built to notice internal contradictions, because a genuine person is boringly consistent. Their address and clock and language and formatting almost always tell one coherent story. The risk is not a German language header. The risk is a German header, a New York clock, and a Singapore address all at once, session after session. Where these signals actually leak from, it is worth knowing where each escapes, because that is where you close it. All of them leak from the machine, not the connection, which is why routing your traffic perfectly does nothing for them. The browser reads the host's time zones, its accept language list, and its region format straight from the operating system, unless the profile has been given its own values to report instead. A proper antidetect profile does exactly that. It carries its own time zones, language, and locale, and hands those to pages in place of the real ones underneath. Without it, every profile on one computer reports the same host settings, and that shared set of values quietly links them all. DNS and the quieter locale hints. There is a network-flavored version of this too, the resolver that turns names into addresses. The DNS path can betray a rough region if your lookups walk out to your real provider instead of through the proxy. It is a locale hint carried on the wire rather than in a setting, and is taxed with the rest. A name lookup pointing at a home provider on one continent, a clock on another, and a language from a third, all under one login, is the same contradiction wearing a network costume. The fix is the same in spirit. Make the path agree with the story the identity is telling. Consistency within a session. There are two kinds of consistency to hold, and the first is within a single session. Every layer a page can read has to point the same way at once. The address, the clock, the offset, the language header, the locale, the installed layouts, all describing one place. If anyone drifts off on its own, that is the seam a script finds. This is why a profile that sets some values and forgets others is a trap. The ones it forgot fall back to the real machine, and the account ends up half in the identity and half in your living room. Consistency of an identity over time. The second kind is harder and matters more. Consistency of one identity across weeks. The clock, language, and locale an account showed on day 1 have to be the values it still shows 3 months later. If a profile reports Singapore this week and then, after some reset, quietly starts reporting your real zone next week, that jump is itself a signal. A real user's locale barely moves for years. So once you assign a time zone and a language to an identity, they become fixed traits of it, written down and kept, not regenerated fresh each time you open the profile. Building dailies uensenis tandem, matching locale to the proxy geography. The rule that falls out of all this is simple. Match the locale to the proxy geography and keep it matched. If the exit is Singapore, the profile's time zone is Singapore. The language header leads with a language a Singapore user would plausibly use, and the region format matches. The address and the settings then tell one story. This is not exotic work. It is a handful of fields set once per identity. People skip it only because the IP check already looked green, and that green light convinced them the location question was answered. It was answered on one channel out of several, the profile and the network as one unit. The through line runs under everything on this channel. The browser profile and the proxy are not two separate purchases you configure independently. They are one identity, and these signals live in the seam between them. The proxy handles the address, the profile handles the clock, the language, the locale, the layouts. Matched, they describe a believable person in one place. Split, the network points one way and the settings point another, and that split is precisely what gets read. So they get set together per identity and checked together before any account trusts the pair. The update that resets your locale. One honest warning, because it catches people who did everything right. A setup that tested consistent can drift later, and the usual cause is an update or a reset. An operating system update can nudge a region setting. A browser update can reset a preference you changed. A rebuilt profile can fall back to host defaults. Any of these can move a clock or a language back to your real home without a word, and the account starts contradicting itself again. So this is not a set once and forget task. It is something you reread on a profile now and then, especially after any update, the same way you retest for a leak. The honest limit, the limit still applies, as it does to every layer. You cannot strip these signals away. Every browser reports them, so the win is agreement, not erasure. Making your time zone, language, and locale agree with your address removes a contradiction. It does not make an account untouchable. No one can promise that, and anyone who does is selling a story. These signals are one input into a risk score that also weighs the network, the behavior, and how accounts connect. Getting the locale right stops an account from flagging itself for a reason that had nothing to do with what it was doing. That is the achievable win, a quiet, consistent identity that stops volunteering evidence against itself under an account that also behaves like a real person. The full guides and tested picks are at multiaccountOps.com. The written checklist of every time zone, language, and locale value to set, how to read them the way a page does, and honest reviews of the antidetect tools that actually let you fix them per profile. No affiliate guesswork, just the settings I keep matched on live accounts. If you want your identities to agree with themselves before a platform checks, that is the place to start. Subscribe for more honest, tested multi-account ops. Next time, the account graph, how platforms connect two logins that never once shared a password through the quiet threads a careless setup leaves between them.